Good morning and welcome to the AlabamaWorks webinar series, a monthly series of webinars designed to provide information and speakers related to COVID-19 in the workforce. The webinars are available at the AlabamaWorks website and at alabamaworks.com. And now your host, Tim McCartney, Chair of the Alabama Workforce Council.
This morning, we're going to hear an update on statewide election preparations from Secretary of State John Merrill, and we will be joined by Mr. David Marsh from the Markle Foundation talking about the Skillful Initiative based on skills-based hiring. But before we begin the presentation today, I'd like to begin by providing you a brief labor market update. These numbers are going to be as of October 16th. When Secretary of Labor Fitzgerald Washington announced that Alabama's preliminary seasonally adjusted September unemployment rate was 6.6%, which is an increase of 1% from August of this year, which was at 5.6%. And it's above the 2019 September reading of 2.7%. The September 2020 unemployment rate represents 148,912 unemployed persons compared to 125,855 in August of this year and only 61,500 in September of 2019. Unemployment by workforce region for September is as follows: 4.8% in Region 1, 6.86% in Region 2, 6.9% in Region 3, 6.1% in Region 4, 7.4% in Region 5, 5.7% in Region 6, and 8.1% in Region 7. Total employment in Alabama for February of this year was 2,075,000 people. Between March 21st and October 10th of this year, 803,847 Alabamians filed an initial unemployment claim. Total employment in Alabama has decreased by 38.76% between February 29 and October 10 of this year. The steepest decline in total employment by sector happened within the administrative support, waste management, and remediation services sector, which experienced a decline of 53.7%. Next came the accommodations and food service industry with a decline of 48%. Educational services were next at 45.2%, followed by arts, entertainment, and recreation with a decline of 43.7%. Manufacturing saw the fifth steepest decline at 39.7%. So that gives you an update on where we stand in the COVID 2020 environment as far as labor market conditions. Now I'm going to turn the program over to Mr. David Marsh from the Markle Foundation, who operates the Skillful Initiative. David is the Senior Manager of State and Federal Policy for Markle, and he's assisting Alabama in implementing its skills-based initiative. So good morning, David, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good morning. See if I can share my screen successfully. Is that working, Chairman? Great, okay. Great, well, good morning, everyone. As the Chairman said, my name is David Marsh, and I'm the Senior Manager here at Skillful. And thank you again, Chairman McCartney and Nick Moore and Jake Easter for inviting me to spend some time with you all today and for sharing the great work that's already been underway in Alabama. We've already learned so much as Skillful from the work you're doing, so really pleasure to be with you all. So Markle is focused on how technology and automation are totally changing the nature of work, and in particular, the skills that are required to perform jobs across the economy. Our goal is to build a labor market that empowers every worker to secure good jobs in a rapidly changing environment. In particular, our focus is the 7 in 10 American adults that don't have a 4-year degree. My day job, when not presenting to you all, is helping to run the Skillful State Network, which is a learning collaborative of 31 states, including Alabama, that is focused on expanding opportunity for adults without a BA. My goal for the presentation to you all today is a few things. First is just to introduce Skillful and our vision for what we call a skills-based labor market. Second is to give you a little bit of background on the work we're doing in 2 states, in Colorado and in Indiana, and throughout the country through this state network. And then finally, to spend most of my time talking about 2 concepts that we've learned about in depth that we hope would be supportive of the ongoing efforts that Alabama has launched. So our view is that we need to fundamentally rethink how the labor market works in order to better serve both workers and employers in the digital age. I think before getting into the sort of wonky details, I think I'm going to start with a quick story that can illustrate why. So this is a true story. And I met a woman in a Colorado workforce center, and she told me that she'd been cleaning houses for about 20 years. She hurt her back and said that she wanted to get off her feet and into a full-time administrative assistant job where she could have the stability and the security that comes with a full-time job with good wages and benefits. She told me she didn't have a college degree and she didn't have any work experience in an office setting. And she told me, frankly, that she was worried that that she would not have a shot to get the job that she was looking for. And the unfortunate reality about how our labor market currently works to assess talent is that she's right. And she really would not have particularly a strong chance for success. But here's the problem with that. If you talk to her for 5 minutes or less, you'd quickly learn a couple of things. First, you'd learn that she didn't just clean houses. She spent 20 years building her own house cleaning business. She juggled 24 clients and never lost a single one. On the side, she added a catering business for the people whose houses she cleaned. And oh, by the way, she's a single mother. She has 4 children, 2 of whom are teachers. One of them is an ROTC, and one's in medical school on their way to being a doctor. Now, if you knew all of that, do you think she could be a successful administrative assistant? Well, let's break down what skills actually are needed in order to do that job. Well, there are attention to detail, customer service, executive function, problem solving, critical thinking. Well, this woman has all of those skills. Maybe she doesn't have all the basic digital skills that she needs, like Microsoft Outlook. And so what we're trying to do at the Markle Foundation is to change the labor market to make it based on skills so that employers can do a better job of looking inward and understanding and articulating what they actually need. So they recognize people like the woman I'm describing as a valuable asset, where educators and training providers can recognize the skills that she is already starting with. So instead of treating her like everyone else, she can build on what she already knows and draw the straightest possible line between where she is today and what is required for a good job. And I think most importantly, we're working to help her understand the skills that she already has. So in a way that she can talk about those in a way that employers understand and that educators and training providers understand. And the reality is that there are stories like this woman's happening all across the country today, in particular now that COVID has created such profound disruption to our labor market. So based on this, I think there are a couple of themes and changes that we're hoping to enable in the states that we work with. First, as I've referenced, is to make skills the common currency of the labor market. So employers recognize and value workers' capabilities wherever they're required, whether that's in a traditional education setting, on the job, in the military, or on their own. Educators understand what skills students already have and clearly articulate those skills to employers so that when they graduate, people know what skills are conferred by each program. Second is lifelong learning to help people to adapt to rapidly changing economic conditions. I think we all now know it is not viable for any of us to rely on the skills that we learned before entering the labor market for our entire careers. We need new systems that make lifelong learning affordable and accessible and effective, including on-the-job training. And then finally, I think is really important in this COVID context is to define success, not just by getting someone into a job, but into a good job. This starts, in our view, with better understanding where good jobs are today how that is changing and how people can build from what they already know to access these jobs. I also think that in many places it requires a reorientation of public resources in the workforce system to focus on this goal of a good job for everyone. So since 2016, the Markle Foundation has run the Skillful Initiative, and we've been working in close partnership with state governments, as I mentioned, in Colorado and then later in Indiana, to bring this vision to light through a series of initiatives. We work with employers directly to change their HR practices to a more skills-based and inclusive approach. We work with career coaches in the workforce system and other places to help build the skills that they need to better serve the long-term economic and career goals of their clients. And then finally, we work with educators and training providers to improve skills transparency of the credentials that they provide. In early 2018, we were getting a lot of interest from other states beyond these first two to learn about what we were doing on the ground. And so we created the Skillful State Network, which has grown now to 31 members, 30 states in the District of Columbia, representing all corners of the country that are united around learning about these ideas and accelerating best practices. And then finally, earlier this year, we launched the Rework America Alliance, which is a national collaboration of businesses, educators, civil rights organizations, and hopefully soon states to align all of the capabilities and efforts that are underway to accelerate and promote an equitable economic recovery from this terrible crisis. So I want to just level set very quickly. The chairman went over the Alabama specific numbers, but just to confirm the challenge that we're facing across the country today, and really to set up the rest of this conversation, right? We know a few things. We know that while people in high wage occupations are already back to pre-crisis levels of employment, low wage workers and workers without formal post-secondary education who are already in the most precarious economic circumstances before the crisis are still really struggling. We've seen disproportionate impacts on people of color, and unfortunately, as the crisis continues, that gap between white workers and people of color are actually widening. And we also know from the last recession that the vast majority of jobs lost are from people without a BA, while the vast majority of jobs gained go to those with a BA or higher. And the last important point is that this crisis is accelerating long underway structural shifts in the economy as more consumers are relying on e-commerce, businesses are adopting more automation, more people are teleworking like otherwise we would be doing this presentation in person. And I think that what that really signals is that as people come back into the labor market, they are going to be looking for jobs where the capabilities required for success are fundamentally different. So we've been thinking a lot about how the work that we've done so far can support strong recovery in this context. And our overarching goal is to help those who have been hit hardest by this crisis emerge in a stronger position to access the good jobs that come back over time. So we're thinking about three main issues. One is how can we accelerate hiring to get people back to work as quickly as possible? Second is how can we remove barriers that have limited opportunity for people in the past, for people of color and for people without post-secondary education? And then finally, how can we connect the people who've been hit hardest with the information, with the training, and with the support that they need to access good jobs? So I'd like to spend the rest of this presentation talking about a couple of concepts that we think could be useful to your efforts in Alabama. First is helping employers identify skills in a different way by reforming their hiring and talent practices. Second is investing in career coaching to give coaches on the front lines of serving people in this crisis all the skills that they need to support workers in meeting their long-term goals. And then finally, I would, in another state, focus on skills transparency and the value of credential transparency. But frankly, I would just probably tell them to go look at what is going on in Alabama already and model themselves after that with all the work you're doing with Credential Engine and others. So I'm going to skip that for today's presentation and focus on the first two. So let's start with employers. Nationally, 75% of employers believe that they are having trouble hiring because applicants don't have the skills that they need to do the job. But we actually think that employers are likely leaving talent on the table and creating artificial barriers that slow hiring, limit diversity, and make it harder for businesses to find the best applicant for the job. And this is because employers often rely on proxies like the bachelor's degree or a certain number of years of work experience to determine whether someone is up for the job. This practice really ballooned during the Great Recession when employers started adding new degree requirements as a way to filter out candidates when they were bombarded with resumes. And to just use Colorado, where we work most intensively as an example, this is 2019 data, but I think it holds to today, which is that 76% of current job postings for administrative assistants asked for a bachelor's degree, while only 20% of people currently doing the job have one. So this is a 56% gap between what we are asking for in new hires and what current successful occupants of the role already have. This is true not just for administrative assistants, but across occupations, which you can see here. Another thing that's not on this slide is that nationally, 61% of full-time jobs that call themselves entry level require at least 3 years of work experience. I'm going to say that again because it doesn't make any sense and you'll think I've misspoken. 61% of jobs that call themselves entry level ask for 3 years of work experience. This is an impossible task that we are asking people to clear. So what the problem is that if we focus on BAs or specific work experience, we're missing out on people from other sectors or those who have built skills through alternative routes. So in this context, think about the retail worker who has extremely good customer service skills, who with a short amount of training could be trained up to be an IT help desk technician. Or think about the returning veteran who has skills that they learned during the military that they could apply to civilian life, but don't have the right credential that sort of recognizes that. And so they're skipped over by employers. And just to give you a sense of the scale of the damage caused by degree inflation, recent research from Opportunity at Work showed that 71 million Americans could be working in higher wage jobs if they were only recognized for skills that they currently use on the job today. So this is a real concern for us right now with the recession, where we fear that employers, unless they're given an alternative path, will revert to this degree inflation and make this problem even worse. Okay, so you might say, sure, that seems like a problem, but we as employers need some way to identify which applicant is up for the job. And if you take one thing away from this presentation today, it's this, which is this is not about asking employers to lower their standards. This is about asking employers to be more specific about what they're actually looking for and what is required for success in the job. So our theory is called skills-based talent practices, and it has three main components. First is removing credential requirements when possible. Of course, there are certain occupations, particularly ones that are licensed, where credentials are necessary. But what we're hoping to do is ask employers to look at every one of their occupations and job descriptions and ask themselves, does this really need a BA requirement? And if the answer is no, take it off. Second is to focus on clearly articulating in those granular skills and competency-based terms what is actually required for success in the job. And I want to be very clear that this is not just about technical skills. Do you know how to use this machine or this program? It also includes the foundational or essential skills that employers tell us are in short supply. So critical thinking, problem solving, communication, etc. And then finally, it's about taking steps to reduce implicit bias in the hiring process. There are a number of things going on here, but for example, just to sort of give you a sense of what we mean, there's a well-known study that shows that a job applicant with a name that sounds like it may belong to an African-American was 50% less likely to get a callback than an identical resume with a traditionally white-sounding name. So you really see all the barriers that are being created for people, and now particularly those who have been hit hardest by this crisis. So we think skills-based hiring has two core benefits, right? One is that it expands opportunity for people who have been totally discouraged from applying, so they don't even submit the application because they don't meet the criteria, so they take themselves out of the running before you even know they exist. Or people who are weeded out early in the screening process before the interview, which is increasingly problematic as businesses rely on more technology and HRIT systems to screen out job applications. And second, I think it helps hire the person who's actually going to do the job right. We all know that person who's got the great resume, who's got the right connections, but when it's time to actually do the job, they can't get it done. This helps us with actual performance, and I'll move to that right now. So what have we actually seen in terms of the data? Our experience so far shows that skills-based hiring is not charity. It actually improves the bottom line for employers through better performance, better employee engagement, lower turnover, and more diversity in the workforce. So just to give you a couple of examples, in Colorado, we worked with a state agency called the Healthcare Policy Financing Agency, which runs call centers to help people understand health insurance claims. And they were struggling. They had 35% of their jobs unfilled and really poor performance. 60% of the calls that came into their center were being dropped before people actually got the information that they needed. And as we worked with them, we realized that they were hiring for people with BAs and with healthcare experience. But they said, oh, wow, we're actually running a call center, and it would be better for us to focus on the applicants who know how to handle the tasks of the job. So how do you deal with difficult customers when they call in? How do you communicate complex information clearly? And that actually turned out to be a lot of former teachers, which were totally being overlooked in the process. Also, they recognized quite quickly that the skills that they had on their current staff had gaps, and they began to offer new and more targeted upskilling and training opportunities. So what happened? Well, their vacancy rate quickly dropped from 35% unfilled positions down to 10. They totally reformed their onboarding process, where their former time to productivity for a new hire was 5 to 6 months, and it went down all the way to 2 weeks. And their most bottom line statistic, their performance of these calls, the call abandonment rate went from 60% to under 8% in 6 months. Another company we worked with was able to double the ethnic diversity of their applicant pool while reducing staff turnover and saving money on recruiting costs. So just one last thing to add here is during the recession, many employers are not hiring. But this process will help with workforce planning as well. It helps by understanding the skills that your current workforce has. It allows employers to map those against the skills that they think will be needed as jobs do come back and that are necessary in this moment. And it makes it easier to make the case for training and upskilling as opposed to layoffs. It improves the ability to reallocate within the firm to make sure that people are being deployed in their highest and best use. And then for succession planning for senior roles, it also lets people understand what can be done to get people ready to take over as someone nears retirement. So I'm going to shift now. If you like what this idea is, but want to figure out how do you actually get it done, I'm going to shift to some opportunities to build momentum. We recognize that changing the way employers assess talent is a long process, but we've done a few things that we want to share with you. First is to highlight prominent employers that are already leading the way. This can send a really strong signal across the business community. It can impact supply chains and lower the sort of fear that comes with asking someone to try something new. One of our sister initiatives at Markle is called the Rework America Business Network, which is a group of Fortune 500 companies that include Toyota and Boeing, obviously both with strong presences in Alabama. Boeing has been a real leader in this space. They've been identifying the skills that their workforce currently has, the skills that the workforce needs, and providing new skills-based training programs to help people access these opportunities. Toyota similarly has been a national leader with the AMT FAME program that creates skills-based pathways to bringing people into jobs and up along the career ladder. So government in this role can play a critical function by defining what a best practice looks like and giving others in the private sector a playbook to follow suit. So the example we often use is the LEEDs certification for green buildings, where the government said, here is what we think is a best practice. They elevated that, they rewarded and celebrated the employers that met that standard. And what it did was it created a private sector competition for that kind of recognition. So we think that can really accelerate progress. Second is using the state as a model employer. In most states, state government is one of the largest employers in the state. Particularly in non-urban regions where the public sector and healthcare jobs play a major role in the local economy, government changing its hiring practices can really encourage local employers to follow suit in order to remain competitive, which also just generally sends a strong signal that the state is practicing what it preaches and is willing to put its money where its mouth is, if you will. So shifting to some of the things we're actually doing in Colorado and Indiana, we are developing tools to help employers. We know that most small and medium-sized businesses don't have time to spend on HR, right? The CEO is often the head of HR along with the head of the marketing department and like a million other things. And they tell us that one of the biggest reasons that they don't change the way that they assess talent is just they don't have time and they don't know what to do with a blank sheet of paper. So what we've done is we've developed something that we call the Skillful Job Posting Generator. This is a tool that allows employers to take their current job descriptions, put them into the generator, and transition in minutes to skills-based postings. It can be customized and tweaked, but it really makes it a much, much quicker process. We've seen it work in 2 to 3 minutes to create a new job description. This is a tool that's available online for anyone to use across the country today, and I think could be a real asset to Alabama as folks continue to think about the credentials of value registry that you're building out. It's really important to be able to articulate the business's needs in terms of skills. So we also have developed a training program that we call the Skillful Talent Series. We know that employers fear, rightfully so, a bad hire. For a small business, one bad hire can be catastrophic. So we want to make sure that people understand the value of doing this. We have developed a 4-part SHRM certified program that helps employers understand first why skills-based practices is not just charity, but a real way to improve the bottom line by reducing time to hire, decreasing turnover, improving performance, all things that they already care about. And second is that it helps people understand how to make the change. The trainings are 4 parts, as I mentioned, and they focus on each part of the talent lifecycle, from attracting talent, like writing a job description, to evaluating and selecting candidates, to creating onboarding that is skills-based, and even to engagement and retention. So we started doing this in Colorado, one employer at a time, where we would go out and sit with an employer for a half day and teach them everything that we thought that they needed to know. But we realized very quickly that this was a very slow process and we would never reach the scale that we were looking for. So when we started up in Indiana, we tried something slightly different. We used a train the trainer model where we worked with people whose full-time job was to spend their day building relationships with local employers, business services teams, chambers of commerce, economic development organizations, and taught them how to integrate these skills-based ideas into their broader work. And it worked out so much better that we actually ended up bringing this approach back to Colorado. And we found that this both helps employers and reach more employers at scale, but it also helps the state. Why? Because we hear very frequently that businesses don't really see value in working with state government. That's in part because the sort of historical approach to business services has been to create a bit of a menu and say, here's what we offer, take it or leave it. And instead, what we want to do is to flip this concept and start by asking employers, what do you need? And then realigning resources in the public sector to meet those challenges. And so not every employer needs to change their hiring practices, but if someone comes into a business services operation or a chamber of commerce and says, I can't find the people that are right for the job, this is another tool in the kit for these teams to change the way they're doing it to better serve businesses in the community. So far, this approach has really done well, and we've expanded this work. We've now started doing it in Oklahoma as well, and are in early phases of projects in both New Jersey and Rhode Island. So with my remaining time, I want to just actually switch quickly to a complementary opportunity that I think will support both employers and the individuals hardest hit by this crisis. And it's about coaching. People who have lost their jobs or income in this crisis are being asked to make incredibly difficult decisions with incredibly high stakes. Someone who's been dislocated has to answer, what career or job should I pursue next that will help me meet my goals? How do I translate what I've done in the past to actually access those goals? Do I need new training? If I do, what kind of training works best for me and what programs have a track record of success? How do I find supportive services to keep my family afloat while I'm in search for jobs and training? And then how do I take all this, put it together, and stay in and succeed in a good job? Well, there is a tremendous amount of information out there, but the research is clear that without someone in your corner, what we call a coach, but could also be a navigator or a counselor, people struggle to act. With coaches, people have a better chance of succeeding in training and in employment. In the aftermath of the Great Recession, workforce interventions that included coaching were actually better at getting people employed faster and improved people's wages over the long term. Unfortunately, so today we have coaching that is delivered across a fractured set of systems, right? It's the publicly funded American Job Centers, career advisors at community colleges, local community-based organizations like Goodwill and the United Way. And unfortunately, there is inconsistency and different quality depending on where these services are rendered. Staff are given different training, different guidance, different incentive structures. And unfortunately, across all of these different functions, most of these professionals are empowered to serve as case managers, rather, that are focused on compliance and getting people through the program, rather than a more human-centered coaching mindset, where their primary goal is to help people understand their personal aspirations and actually take the path that is right for them to meet their long-term goals. Coaches have access to virtually no public funding to support professional development or skill building. They don't have access to technology and tools that would reduce administrative burdens or help them better understand the rapidly changing trends in the labor market. And I think really important to note is that many are operating under an incentive structure that rewards people for getting into a job placement rather than a good job that will be long-lasting, high quality, and have a pathway to advancement. So this makes it much harder for workforce professionals to provide that personalized support that we know they would want to provide, particularly in situations where long-term programs like an associate's degree that would take longer but help someone more in the long term could be useful. So very quickly, our vision is to help people get access to high quality support no matter where they seek help. And what we have done is we've tried to understand what are the skills and the tools and the resources that a coach would need in order to be successful in serving their customers, and build out a training curriculum that provides all of these things. We've built out a curriculum that is centered on sort of human-centered design, skills-based practices, and equity. And we have developed this curriculum which helps a coach do a better job to sort of forge an individual connection with a client, to understand the labor market more effectively, to help the client articulate the skills that they already have and what skills that they might actually need in order to get access to a good job, and help people actually identify what services are available to them already today that they can take advantage of while they're getting trained. So in Colorado and Indiana, we've developed a few programs to actually get this training out to people. One is an 8-month intensive program called the Governor's Coaching Corps. We provide a cohort of 35 coaches with tools and training to become what we think as elite coaches, and give them access to a peer network of professionals across the state and across systems that they can work together to solve complex challenges for their clients. We built a tech-based community of practice that is accessible to all coaches in the state, that lets people share this content in a lighter touch, more scalable way. And then finally, what we've done is we're actually starting to build out a virtual curriculum that can be deployed to basically any place in the country via the state or via certain organizations that can actually get this done without the sort of labor-intensive in-person training process. So this is sort of just a second concept that I wanted to flag that we think is really valuable. And I know Nick has mentioned this as something that the state is working on as well. So those are the two main things that I wanted to talk about. I highlight these not just because we work on them, but because they fit well with the initiatives that Alabama already has under the way. And I'm just really grateful for the chance to present them both to you today. And I don't know if there's time for questions, but if there is, I'm happy to take any. And if not, happy to sort of yield back. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share some time with you.
Markle, as we embark on Alabama's skills-based hiring initiative. I'm so glad you joined us today to discuss the ongoing national work centered on skills-based hiring, because together with Skillful, we're about to launch a statewide effort, as you know, to expand skills-based hiring in Alabama. Skills-based hiring will allow our employers to place the exact skills and competencies that are needed so we can hire, our employers can hire the right person for the right job. And the employee can excel at that job because they will have the competencies to do that job. Skills-based job descriptions make it easier to recruit job candidates who have credentials of value that show their mastery of the skills included in the job descriptions. Now, the competency models developed by the Alabama Committee on Credentialing and Career Pathways and the Alabama Credential Registry will allow employers to customize skills-based job descriptions with ease. A skills-based hiring ecosystem, if you will enhance the ability of employers to recruit and retain talent and save money during the process. But we need industry to participate in this process for it to work to their benefit. For individuals, skills-based hiring will allow people to enter the workforce by getting short-term, non-degree credentials that often count toward degrees without having to go ahead and get a 2 or 4 year degree on the front end. And this is especially important during our COVID-19 environment. So we look forward to working with industry and the folks from Markle and the GOAT to get this in place. Thank you so much again for your presentation. It's my honor now to turn the program over to our Secretary of State, Mr. John Merrill, who has graciously agreed to spend a few minutes with us today to share some updates on all that he and his team are doing to facilitate the November 3rd general election in Alabama. Mr. Secretary, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of the program today. I think it's important for the people on the call to do things about what's currently ongoing as far as the preparation for our November 3rd general election term. First and foremost, in order to participate on November the 3rd, which is 15 days from today, you have to be a registered voter. And today is the last day to make application to become a registered voter in the state of Alabama for the November 3rd general election. Now, if you can't get to the Board of Registrar's office in your county by close of business today to submit a written application, then if you have a valid Alabama driver's license, you can visit our website at alabamavotes.gov, or you can go to our mobile app and download it at Vote for Alabama, and then you can put your information in. Or if you've moved from one location in our state to another, then you can make sure that your information is up to date, and then your voice will be heard and your vote will be counted. If you do that, you'll be able to join the 1,712,324 voters that have become members of the voter rolls since January the 19th, 2015, which is 5 years and 9 months ago today. And you'll be one of the 3,692,163 registered voters in Alabama. Those numbers are unprecedented and unparalleled in the history of our state. Now, as far as participating in person on election day, all 1,980 polling sites will be open on election day. We encourage you to go to your polling place. We project that between 2.5 and 2.8 million Alabamians will vote on November the 3rd. Now, one of the things that will be unusual when you go to your polling site is that all polling officials will be wearing face masks. They'll all have latex, non-latex gloves on. They'll have hand sanitizer everywhere. There'll be disinfectant spray to be used and disinfectant wipes to be used in each and every location throughout the state. And when the election is over, then we will have resources that will return all the polling places to their pre-election condition to ensure that they are safe and secure for future use for other events and activities. Now, a number of people are a little apprehensive or anxious about going to the polls. They like to vote through the absentee process. And you certainly are able to do that by submitting an absentee application. And you can do that in person at your local absentee election manager's office, your circuit clerk, or you can actually mail it in if you prefer. If you mail it in, you need to know that it must be received by the absentee election manager's office no later than close of business on October the 29th. Then your ballot must be returned by the close of business on November the 2nd if you're doing so in person. If you're doing so through the mail, you have until November the 3rd at noon to make sure that your ballot is received. Now, you should follow all the instructions on the absentee ballot application and on the absentee ballot to make sure that you are in compliance with state law. You must submit your application along with your valid photo ID in order to have your voice heard and your vote counted. The largest number of absentee ballots that have ever been successfully returned in any election in the history of our state is 89,000 plus when President Obama was elected to his second term in 2012. As of today, we already have more than 134,000 ballots that have been received and more than 200,000 applications have been submitted. We expect that we will be north of 200,000 ballots received by November the 3rd. It may be even higher than that, but if trends continue, we will definitely be north of 200,000. Now, we're excited about where we are and about how things are currently going in the elections process. All 68 jurisdictions in the 67 counties are successfully prepared to receive our people that will be voting in person and our additional absentee voters. So if you have any questions for me, I'd love to entertain them at this time. I just want to make sure that y'all understood what the process was, where we were, and what our projections are for November the 3rd. Are there any questions?
Chris, do we have any questions that have been sent in?
We don't. Secretary Merrill, I have one question. What is your projection for turnout on November 3rd? What percentage are you looking at?
Have between 2.5 and 2.8 million Alabamians go to the polls to cast their ballot on election day. That's between 68 and 75% of our voters. Those numbers would be records. The highest number we've ever had is 2.1 million. That was when President Trump was elected in 2016.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Well, Secretary Merrill, I certainly appreciate all you're doing to secure the integrity of the election, as well as all the other work that you do as Secretary of State. And see, as everybody can, that you're driving somewhere today. So I certainly appreciate you taking the time to do that during the busy schedule.
I'm not driving, but I am riding in the vehicle.
Well, sorry about that. That's right. We don't want to talk about driving and talking.
Driving.
Well, we appreciate you, and thank you again for providing this information. It's very, very important that we all get out to vote. And thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If y'all need us, if we can be more helpful,
Yes, sir. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. And now we're going to hear from Nick Moore from the Governor's Office of Education and Workforce Transformation. Nick's going to give us an update on Reimagining Workforce Preparation Grant, which was just awarded by the federal government to the state. It's almost $18 million. So Nick, you've got the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Before I get into talk a little bit about the Reimagining Workforce Prep Grant, I want to make a bit of our labor force participation numbers and some of it. So if you were to take a look at Alabama's labor, the number of people age 16 to 64 that are in the labor force, we reached a height of labor force participation in July, somewhat falling off, and Some of that is structural in the workforce. July 19 until Governor Ivey's talent plan put in or was implemented. Alabama's labor force participation rate went down 56 points in January of 2015. So of the thing doing was focusing on the cliffs and something that make it difficult for work to them in some cases as they're trade employment. So from the time her talent development strategic plan until January of 2019, Alabama's labor force participation rate actually increased from 56.7% to 57.8% in the history of the state. So the labor force participation
Tim, Nick is having some technical issues there. Do you want to, this has been one with technical issues today, unfortunately. We'll try and get Nick back in just a second. Do you have anything to add from the Workforce Council standpoint?
Not really, not prepared, but I can, how long do you think it'll take to get him back?
He is there. I see him, but obviously he was glitchy. So
I just sent Jake a message to go check on him, see if he's having a stroke.
All right, so I crashed. I think everybody. Can you hear me now?
you're still a little glitchy, Nick.
Okay, I'm back, everybody. Let's try this again.
All right, you've got the floor.
You got it, Nick.
I don't think Nick's back.
Yeah, sorry about that, everybody. We've experiencing technical difficulties on Nick's end. Some reason he's crashed today a couple of times. I told Chris, who's running the background here, that I'll do a little tap dance, but I don't think that'll help our audience. Nick, are you back with us now? Can you hear
me?
Yes, there you go, Nick.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yeah. But don't
We're
feel
having really
bad.
bad. Our internet connection is really unstable here at the Capitol, and so why don't we just call it a day? And I will send this presentation out, and anybody that has any questions, you can ask me. But I will, while we've got the slides up, I'm going to try to share again and just make my point here. But if it crashes again, we'll just share this out with everybody.
I think you're
So the point I was trying to make is that because Governor Ivey started focusing, because Governor Ivey, is it not working again?
No.
Hello?
Yeah, you're working.
Not
Nick.
working.
You're working.
Okay. Because the governor started focusing on mitigating benefit cliffs before the pandemic began, Alabama was able to get our labor force participation rate even higher than what it was before the pandemic. That's pretty unprecedented for even the rest of the states in the Southeast and certainly the country. Now, taking a look here, if you look at the opportunity tracker, you see when were most of the jobs lost during the pandemic. You see that the biggest jobs lost were happened in July, when we had over 30% of low wage jobs lost. Let's take a look and move into the future here. And let's look in August. We go from negative 30% to just negative 11% for low wage jobs. So that means 19% had recovered. But let's look at the delta here, going back from April, where only 1.7% of high wage jobs are lost, 11.8% of middle skill. let's look now in July, all of those had recovered, the middle and high wage jobs. And so what this shows us is that some of the jobs are not coming back that had been lost among those in the low wage sector. So we have an opportunity now to upskill those individuals into a job that was actually in demand before the pandemic and is still in demand now. And so that's also just showing you the big result from our signal survey. A plurality of people, of the survey respondents, do want to go back to work and get a short-term program that leads to employment in an in-demand job, but they don't want to go into debt, and they want that to count towards a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree so that they have long-term sustainability and a pathway and transferability. So we have an opportunity to sort of rethink workforce training. We have where it was just seniors and adults. Now we have those displaced by the pandemic to get them retrained in the new fields through short-term programs that are credit bearing and that are in demand. And so rebundling and unbundling is going to be a big strategy. That means breaking down a traditional program into 4 or 5 different modules, attaching credentials and certifications to that. A big point to understand is in the 1970s, 2/3 of our in-demand jobs only required a high school diploma or less. Now it's the inverse of that. 2/3 of our jobs require a post-secondary education. And we have more than 800,000 people that are primed to take advantage of these opportunities to re-enter the workforce, to help us recover from the pandemic, and also to help us meet the attainment goal. Because remember, in January, many of these 800,000 weren't thinking about earning a credential and weren't actually part of our target population for the attainment goal. Now we have an additional target population. So that brings us to the Reimagining Workforce Grant, Reimagining Workforce Preparation Grant. We won $17.8 million. This is going to be delivered for individuals that have been displaced, and they're going to be employed in manufacturing, health, IT, transportation, and construction. And they will have human services coupled with the short-term workforce training program to help them persist in the program. The training is going to be delivered by ATN, and some of the recruitment is going to be done by AIDT, and there's going to be 3-member panels in each of our 7 workforce regions that's going to help recruit employers. The point of this too is to help people who do not have a high school diploma or equivalency enter into post-secondary education through what we call the Ability to Benefit program. So right now, unless you've got a high school diploma or equivalency, you don't actually have access to the Pell Grant unless you can meet certain conditions like passing 6 credit hours or a lot of different contact hours. We're trying to make it simpler so that people that complete a career pathway program can have access to the Pell Grant. So what we're doing here through the Workforce Stabilization Grant is doing a statewide pilot that would inevitably allow us to scale this statewide over the next couple of years. This will be the new way of doing business in the state as far as training people. This is just the beginning of that process. And then I'll also note that our David tool that we developed with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta will be launching this Wednesday. That's going to help operationalize our no wrong door approach to the workforce system and help people understand at the point of intake what benefits they're going to lose and what they could stand to gain by taking a bet on paid employment. Last, I'll note that if you could please go to this website here, credentials.ake.edu. If you're an employer, please go. This is what the website looks like. Up at the top right-hand corner, register as a provider. We really need to have your credentials registered. All of that Mr. Marsh was talking about with skills-based hiring. The rub of this right now is to make sure that we get your credentials registered so that way we can match them up with the skills identified by the ACCCP. And then in the next couple of months, we're going to have a portal to where you can go on and access all of the credentials and competency models, customize that, and have unique skills-based job descriptions so you can match up with the talent that you need at this time. So thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. Sorry for the glitches, and I know I'm a bit over time as well. So thanks for your grace.
No problem, Nick. That happens to all of us. I saw CNBC the other day and they were having the same issues. So anyway, something we live with in our virtual society now. In closing, I want to thank Secretary of State John Merrill once more, and also Mr. David Marsh of the Markle Foundation, and as always, Nick, for joining us today and bringing us up to date on these exciting programs, and also about the election coming up November 3rd. Y'all are all playing very important roles in improving our state, and I certainly appreciate all your hard work. So everybody out there, sorry for the glitches today, just one of those things. Please mark your calendar for 9 a.m. on November 16th when we return to explore the crucial work performed by the Alabama Committee on Credentialing and Career Pathways that will serve as a foundation for the skills-based training and hiring that we discussed in today's program. So for those of you that can't make that time, just as always, we will post this on the AlabamaWorks.com website. So in the meantime, be safe, be careful in the COVID environment, and remember to go vote November 3rd or before as an absentee.